Joining us now, he's the chairman of the Republican National Committee, Reince Priebus. Chairman Priebus, thanks for joining us.
Hey, happy to be on the show. Thanks.
Listen, before we talk about some of the national issues, I know that you're going through a whole process of trying to remold the Republican Party. I want to keep it local here for a minute. E.W. Jackson, he is the lieutenant governor nominee for the Commonwealth of Virginia. I know you know that this is a very important election. What do you think of E.W. Jackson? Is this the right candidate at the right time, or is he a distraction right now?
Look, he's got to be the right candidate at the right time. He's the choice of the Virginia party, and I think that he's a pretty dynamic guy. But I think ultimately this is about Ken Cuccinelli and Terry McAuliffe, and I think we know that. And it's never just like in the presidential election. It's usually never about the VP. It's always about the presidential candidate. It's always about the governor. I went through big races in Wisconsin too, and it was always about Scott Walker. And so that's what's going to matter in the end, but obviously I think it's good to have an articulate lieutenant governor that can work hard underneath and move votes and help out the top of the ticket.
All right, let's turn to national politics. That's your backyard. A lot of people are saying that the GOP needs to be retooled. I think you are in agreement with that. What's the proper way to go about it in your mind?
Well, everyone has a different theory of the case. That's very clear. And I don't necessarily think, one theory is better than the next. But, where my head's at and where I live is having a ground operation that's second to none. And I just don't feel that the national party and it's not just the last 2 years or 4 years. It's really been, almost 10 years since you've had a year-round operation, if ever. The fact is this has been a party that shows up 5 months before an election in a huge way and tries to move mountains, and it just doesn't work that way anymore. We're not running against Al Gore and John Kerry anymore.
And I think when you look at the 2010 elections, Chairman Priebus, and you look at the success of the pushback on the Walker recall, which I know you were intimately involved with in Wisconsin, those successful efforts utilized the grassroots. They utilized the organizations on the ground. It wasn't a big, huge air campaign with a bunch of money coming in and spending television money. It was about knocking on doors and getting people motivated. Is that where the party has been falling down? And these 527s you talk about, the Karl Roves of the world, they seem to just focus on the big television commercials.
Yeah,
is that misguided?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's misguided, but my general view is sort of in line with where you're going, which is, look, we didn't lose because we don't have enough 30-second ads.
Yeah.
And so, I just find that to be ridiculous. I think the elephant in the room is a couple things. One, let's not deny the fact that we have to have candidates that move America and have an awesome message and really relate to people at a real personal way, because the presidential elections are huge cultural votes, and we've got to understand that. So that's the elephant in the room. But secondly, you're absolutely right. When you talk about turnout, if you don't show up in communities, like in South Florida and Central Florida, on a long-term basis, and you don't get to know people, and you don't do those things for years, it's not going to work. Look.
Okay, you're right, but I got to get you back to your first point, because you talk about politicians who move people. You look at Ted Cruz, you look at Rand Paul, you look at Mike Lee, you look at some of the things that they've done with the filibusters in the Senate. They are moving people. They're getting people excited, but you've got party elders within the party who are trying to smack them down. Isn't that a problem?
Well, listen, I don't believe in any of these. I don't know. I'm assuming you're talking about John McCain and
Lindsey Graham and a couple of the other ones.
Look, I don't think any of these guys should be slapping anybody. The fact is, in our party, we ought to be building everybody up, and that's why I think when Rand Paul went on the floor, I sent out a tweet and called upon all Republican senators to get on the floor and support Rand. If you really look at the horsepower in our party, where is all the gas? It's in that young streak that's building very quickly.
All right, let me ask you about a couple of the things that are definitely in the news right now. Have to do with Susan Rice being chosen as the National Security Advisor. That's sort of I think controversial in some quarters. Samantha Powers to be the UN ambassador. Your thoughts?
Well, the president doesn't care, right? He doesn't give a rip. he's just going to do whatever he wants to do and doesn't care about these scandals, doesn't care about what things look like. He's in your face, and now he's going to go, launch off some fireworks and do another jobs tour. And the one thing the president has done pretty well, which is pretty, I think, pretty appalling, but he's been able to be judged by the things that he says, not by what he does. And so here's a guy who has mastered the art of constantly talking and allowing people to judge him based on his talking, but not on what he says. And so that's what he's going to do again. And and he again refuses to deal with any of these scandals, refuses to deal with the debt, refuses to deal with just having a budget for a year. But that's who he is, and that's what we have, and that's where we're at in this country. Unfortunately, we have got ourselves in a real fix, and we've got a leader that really doesn't give a rip, and that's clear by what he's been doing lately.
And finally, they have the AP issue with the phone records.
Yeah.
You got James Rosen's phone records. Now comes word that we've all been Rosened. Apparently, the NSA has been collecting any calls made on Verizon inside America. All Americans now are being Rosened.
Pretty interesting from a president that promised incredible transparency, and he promised himself to come right out of a page of the ACLU, and turns out that he's completely the opposite on that front too. And not only doesn't he follow through on promises he makes to the American people at a convention, he doesn't even follow through on the promises he makes to his base, and he doesn't follow through on basic tenets of American leadership in the White House. So, again, look, you guys aren't surprised. I'm not surprised. But the bigger problem for all of us, in a real serious way, is that we've got a country that needs a lot of work and a lot of help, but long-term health problems economically, and a White House that isn't being truthful with the American people. So now we need to make sure that we've got opposition that's organized and on message, and can also move America so that we can be more successful in presidential elections, and that we hold the House and win the Senate. And so that's a big piece of what our challenges is on our side, and we've got to be much better too. So,
Chairman Priebus, we got to roll. We appreciate you being with us.
All right.